How did one century change the world? What if history's greatest revolution wasn't a moment of noise, but a century of whispers? Welcome. You're listening to History Rot. Tonight, you're invited to rest, to breathe, and to drift gently through time. As you lay your head down, we'll journey together through the 20th century, a span of just 100 years that reshaped our entire world. This won't be a story of war or chaos, but of quiet transformation. We'll meet dreamers and doers, inventors and leaders, artists and astronauts. All of them left subtle fingerprints on the modern world. Some with a whisper, others with a single step. We'll explore how the quietest inventions rewired the future, how movements gained strength without shouting, and how the slow, steady heartbeat of change transformed everything we know. So take a deep breath in and out. Let your eyes grow heavy as we begin to ask, how did one century change the world? Let us begin. Chapter 1. Before the Storm, 1900 to 1910. What does the world feel like just before it begins to change forever? It is the dawn of the 20th century, the year 1900. Most of the world is lit by firelight, candles, lanterns, and the occasional flicker of electric glow. The planet is vast and slow. Trains rumble across continents. Ships still sail across oceans. The sound of a horse's hooves is more common than a car engine. Yet beneath this stillness, the century is already stirring. In cities like Berlin, Paris, and New York, strange new machines begin to appear. Elevators, phonographs, moving pictures. These are novelties, curiosities, not yet the stuff of life, but in hindsight they are quiet signals, whispers of the world to come. In a small Swiss patent office, a young man named Albert Einstein works by day and dreams by night. He doesn't yet know it, but his ideas about time and space will redefine everything, not with thunder but with thought. In Paris, another man is breaking rules with a paintbrush. Pablo Picasso, barely 20, is abandoning realism for emotion, geometry, abstraction. Art is starting to bend, and the world will follow. Elsewhere, Nikola Tesla dreams of wireless power. Marie Curie isolates radium. The Wright brothers are tinkering with gliders. Sigmund Freud is writing about the mind. The 1800s are still casting long shadows, but the century ahead is preparing its stage. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it. The tick of a distant clock, the breath before the symphony begins. So let yourself settle deeper. Breathe in and breathe out. Because the next 100 years will be like none before them. Chapter 2. The Machine Age and Modern Minds, 1910 to 1920. Can a machine whisper? Can progress hum softly, reshaping life without ever raising its voice? The second decade of the century begins not with fireworks, but with rhythm, the gentle, endless rhythm of the machine. Factories hiss, conveyors glide, gears turn, quietly, reliably, without rest. Across America, a man named Henry Ford perfects the moving assembly line. His invention doesn't shout. It simply repeats again and again until the world begins to move at its pace. A car that once took 12 hours to build now takes just 90 minutes. And more than the car itself, it's this silent efficiency that changes everything. In cities from Detroit to Berlin, people begin to move inward. Rural quiet gives way to urban buzz. Elevators lift workers into steel towers. Subways pulse beneath the streets. Life becomes faster, but also more precise, more scheduled, more mechanical. Meanwhile, another machine is taking shape, not of metal, but of thought. In Vienna, Freud is exploring the unconscious. In London, Virginia Woolf is writing in streams, not chapters. In Russia, Kandinsky paints music onto canvas. Ideas, too, are becoming industrial, broken down, reassembled, endlessly replicated. And far above it all, humans leave the ground. The Wright brothers' dream becomes real, and airplanes, once fantasy, begin to appear in skies across Europe and America. Not loud, just present, a new kind of movement, soft and swift. But the hum of progress has an echo, and in distant corners of Europe, alliances tighten. Empires rattle their sabers, but softly, for now. It is a strange moment. The modern world is arriving, but it hasn't yet made its entrance. The century continues to prepare itself, quietly. So rest easy. History is still whispering. And soon, it will begin to stir louder. Chapter 3. The Roaring Twenties, 1920 to 1930. What happens when a whisper suddenly dances, when quiet change puts on a jazz record, a silk dress, and steps into the light? The war is over. The world exhales. And for the first time in years, people begin to feel alive, not in battlefields, but in cities lit with electricity and possibility. It's the 1920s. And though the noise of the decade is what people remember, the jazz, the flappers, the fizz of champagne, its roots are still whisper soft. In New York, a Harlem Renaissance blooms quietly in back rooms and basement clubs. Langston Hughes pens poems by candlelight. Duke Ellington fills smoky lounges with sounds never heard before. It is black brilliance, rising without permission, creating culture that will echo for a century. Across the Atlantic, Paris is teeming with expatriates, writers and painters who sit in cafes with notebooks and absinthe. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Stein. They aren't loud, but their words reshape how a generation will feel. Lost, searching, daring. Meanwhile, science is no less poetic. In 1927, a Belgian priest named Georges Lemaitre proposes that the universe had a beginning, a single moment of expansion. What we now call the Big Bang began, as so many things do, as a quiet theory. And tucked away in Berlin, a patent is filed for something small, but transformative: television. It won't become widespread for decades, but the idea is planted that moving images might one day enter our homes and shape how we see the world. Even fashion speaks. Hemlines rise, corsets fall away. Women vote, work, drive, speak. Rights once whispered about are now being claimed, not with violence, but with presence. The world feels young again, rebellious, awake. But even in its rhythm, a shadow gathers. In America, the stock market climbs endlessly. In Germany, inflation balloons. The quiet warning signs are easy to miss beneath the glitter. For now, though, the century is dancing. And so, as you breathe in and out, picture the soft glow of street lamps on rain-soaked pavement, the rustle of dresses, the low hum of a gramophone spinning just before sleep. History still moves gently. But it's learning how to move with style. Chapter 4. The Great Depression and Quiet Resilience, 1930 to 1940. What happens when the music fades, and all you're left with is the sound of survival? The party ends with a silence. No crash, no explosion, just the soft shatter of a market that had climbed too high too fast. In October 1929, Wall Street collapses, and like dominoes, banks fall, savings vanish, homes empty. The world enters a new kind of quiet, one filled not with peace, but with pause. It is a stillness shaped by empty pantries, silent factories, long lines and hollow eyes. But even here, history whispers forward. In America, a man in a wheelchair takes the presidency. Franklin Delano Roosevelt speaks not with thunder, but with calm. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. His fireside chats crackle through radios, a nation huddled close to warmth not just of flame, but of voice. In the dust-choked plains of the Midwest, families plant seeds that won't grow. The land itself seems tired, but even through drought and despair, people hold on to each other, to habit, to hope. Elsewhere, quiet revolutions continue. In Germany, a strange man rises to power not by force, not yet, but through rhetoric, repetition, spectacle. The century begins to learn that sometimes even tyranny starts as a whisper. In Britain, a codebreaker named Alan Turing sketches out a new kind of machine, one that can think. His ideas seem abstract, even impossible, but they mark the birth of computing, long before anyone understands its future. And across oceans in India, another quiet force emerges. Gandhi, thin and barefoot, leads millions not with weapons but with silence. Salt marches, hunger strikes, peaceful resistance. The empire trembles, not from bombs, but from conscience. The 1930s are a lesson in endurance. This is not a decade of loud heroes. It's a decade of those who kept going, through dust, through hunger, through fear. So breathe deeply now, let your body rest. And imagine a single candle glowing in a dark window. A symbol not of power, but of persistence. Sometimes, surviving the silence is the revolution. Chapter 5. A World at War, 1940 to 1945. What happens when the whispers turn to warnings, and the world forgets how to listen until it's too late? The 1940s begin not with invention or music, but with marching boots and sirens in the dark. Across Europe, cities dim their lights. Radios go quiet. The world is holding its breath again. But even war, as loud as it seems, is made of moments. Small, human, and often heartbreakingly still. In London, families sleep in subway tunnels as bombs fall above. In Poland, trains arrive with no return. The sky hangs heavy, and history breaks, not all at once, but piece by piece. And yet, even here in the deepest shadow, there are whispers of light. A young girl in Amsterdam keeps a diary. Her name is Anne. She writes not for the world, but for herself. And yet her words will echo for generations. Not angry, not bitter, just honest. In France, resistance spreads. Not with armies, but with couriers on bicycles, radios hidden in attics, messages scrawled on slips of paper. A quiet war within the war. In America, factories awaken, not with the clang of industry, but the steady rhythm of unity. Women step into overalls and into history. Rosie the Riveter becomes more than a poster. She becomes a pulse. And on the sea, on the ice, in the skies, people begin to dream not just of victory, but of what comes after. It's easy to imagine war as chaos, but often it is a pattern of routine and waiting. Letters home, quiet meals, eyes scanning the horizon. It is in those spaces, between action, that the century continues to shift. And then, the tide turns. D-Day, Liberation, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Moments so heavy they are difficult to whisper, so we won't linger in the explosions. We'll linger in the aftermath. In the silence that follows, surrender. In the slow rebuilding of cities and spirits. In the realization that the world can never quite return to what it was. The war ends not with cheers, but with quiet relief. A long exhale. A silence not of despair, but of exhaustion. And somewhere beneath it all, the world begins to wonder. What now? Chapter 6. Rebuilding and Rising, 1945 to 1955. when the dust settles? Can hope grow in silence? Can broken nations find harmony in the hush that follows the storm? The war is over, and the world is left standing in a strange kind of quiet. Cities lie in rubble, Dresden, Warsaw, Tokyo, but in the quiet streets, something stirs. Children chase stray soccer balls through cracked pavement. Shops reopen, gardens are planted in the ruins. This is not a triumphant return. It is careful, cautious, gentle. In Europe, the Marshall Plan arrives not as thunder but as seed, dollars and supplies scattered across a devastated continent, giving rise to factories, schools, futures. In Japan, a nation begins to reimagine itself, from empire to industry, from war to innovation. Tokyo buzzes with quiet ambition. And in America, soldiers come home to a new idea: suburbia. Rows of homes, each nearly identical, each with a television and a washing machine. The American dream isn't shouted, it's sold in pamphlets and jingles, whispers of comfort after a decade of chaos. But even in peace, tension simmers. In 1947, a diplomat named George Kennan sends a telegram. Inside it, the early strategy of the Cold War. It's not a war of bombs, not yet. It's a war of nerves, of quiet policies and unseen threats. In Berlin, a wall has not yet been built, but an airlift begins. Planes hum over the city, dropping supplies like snowflakes. Over 200,000 flights, all to feed hope. And in a small lab, a few scientists make something that will change the future more than they can imagine. A transistor. No fanfare, no parade. But with it, the seeds of the digital world are planted. Meanwhile, in the American South, a quiet resistance is beginning to rise. Rosa Parks hasn't yet refused her seat. Martin Luther King hasn't yet marched. But in lunchrooms and churches, people begin to speak, softly, firmly, that change must come. And in space, a new frontier looms, not yet explored, but dreamed of, sketched in pencil by men with slide rules and quiet visions. This is a decade of rebuilding, of choosing peace, however fragile, of layering bricks not just in buildings but in belief. So rest easy, let your body sink deeper. The noise is behind us, for now, but the world is shifting still, and the sky is starting to call. Chapter 7. The Space Between Us, 1955 to 1965. Can a whisper reach the stars? Can silence stretch across the sky and return as wonder? It begins not with a countdown, but with a beep. October 4th, 1957. A metal sphere, small, silent, unremarkable to the eye, circles the Earth. Again, and again, and again. Sputnik. The world looks up and realizes it has changed. Not with a bang, with an orbit. The space age has begun. In schools and living rooms, children stare at the sky differently. The stars are no longer distant. They are destinations. And behind closed doors, nations race quietly. Not just for space, but for presence, for proof of possibility. In Russia, Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human to leave Earth. He returns a hero, not with a sword, but with a smile. In America, engineers at NASA sketch capsule designs by hand, calculating by slide rule. Mistakes are not options. Every bolt, every decimal, every line matters. And in the silence between launches, another kind of movement begins. In Montgomery, Alabama, a woman named Rosa refuses to move from her seat. She does not shout. She does not curse. She simply stays. That single act, quiet and firm, echoes louder than any rocket. Across the American South, buses roll slowly. Marchers walk with signs held high and eyes cast forward. Peaceful resistance meets fire hoses and fists, but it keeps walking. In Washington, a preacher speaks to a crowd of thousands. I have a dream, a sentence soft enough for a lullaby, yet powerful enough to shake a nation. And in the background of all this, music changes. Elvis sways, Motown rises. A generation begins to hear the world in new rhythms. Television spreads too, not as spectacle but as mirror. Families gather around glowing screens, watching a world unfold in black and white. The Beatles haven't arrived yet, but the stage is almost set. This is a decade where the sky opens, and so does the soul. So breathe in and out. Imagine yourself floating gently above the earth, looking down, listening not to engines or noise, but to the quiet gravity that holds us all. Chapter 8. Revolution in the Air, 1965 to 1975. What happens when the whispers turn into questions? When a generation leans forward and asks, softly but insistently, why? The late 60s arrive not with a single moment, but with a murmur that grows, not loud, but unignorable. It's in the music first, in the slow aching strum of a guitar, in the lyrics that say more than slogans ever could. Bob Dylan sings, "The times they are a-changin'," and across the world people begin to believe it. In Vietnam, the war is televised. Each night, images flicker into living rooms, jungles, helicopters, soldiers too young to shave. It's the first time war comes home not through telegrams, but through screens. And it changes everything. College campuses become centers of stillness. Students sitting cross-legged, holding candles, holding signs. Not storming, but sitting. Their power is in presence. Meanwhile, other revolutions simmer. In Stonewall, the LGBTQ+ community pushes back, not with fists, but by refusing to be invisible. A riot, yes, but also a declaration. We are here. In Oakland, the Black Panthers hand out free breakfast to children before school. They carry books, ideas, pride. They build community in the face of silence. In India, Indira Gandhi rises. In Britain, Harold Wilson speaks of a new technological frontier. In China, Mao launches the Cultural Revolution, not with weapons, but with red books and raised fists. And then, 1969, the moon, a footprint in gray dust. Neil Armstrong speaks, one small step for man, and the entire world listens, breathes in, holds it. But even that moment, cosmic as it is, feels personal. It reminds us that even in the vastest darkness, we can touch the impossible. This decade is filled with echoes, not all of them peaceful. But underneath the marches and manifestos is a single shared rhythm, a desire to be heard, to be seen, to be more than what came before. So as you lie here now, still and quiet, imagine a night in 1969. Someone lies on a rooftop, staring up at a moon that's no longer just a dream. A soft wind stirs. A new kind of world is beginning. Chapter 9. The Digital Seed, 1975 to 1985. Can the future arrive quietly? Can the most powerful changes begin not with a shout, but with a flicker on a screen? The year is 1975. The war is over. The protests have quieted. The moon has been touched. And yet, beneath the surface, the world is about to change again. Not through fire or flight, but through code. In a garage in California, two young men, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, are building something small. A beige box, a screen, a keyboard. It doesn't look like a revolution, but it is. The personal computer is born not with a launch, but with a blink, a cursor waiting, a prompt. The future asking quietly, "What would you like to do?" Elsewhere, another kind of revolution is happening. In 1976, a Concorde jet crosses the Atlantic in under 4 hours. In 1978, the first test tube baby is born. And in 1980, a young CNN begins to broadcast the news. all day, every day. Time begins to feel different, more immediate, more connected, not louder, just faster. Meanwhile, in classrooms, children begin to learn not just math and reading, but basic, a computer language typed slowly, line by line. At night, arcades glow. Pixels dance across screens. Pac-Man and Space Invaders, joy, strategy, escape, all in the palm of your hand. But not all is bright. In the shadow of nuclear stockpiles, a chill lingers. The Cold War remains cold, but constant. The doomsday clock ticks closer to midnight, moved not by noise but by calculation, by possibility. Still, even in this uncertainty, the century keeps evolving. In music, a new genre rises, hip-hop. Born in the Bronx, it spreads on cardboard dance floors and spray-painted walls. It is poetry and rhythm, born of struggle, shaped by silence. In 1984, a novel becomes prophecy. Surveillance is real. Computers are everywhere. The line between science and story is blurring. And yet, life continues. Families gather around TVs. Letters still arrive in mailboxes. The internet is a whisper, not yet a presence. But its seed has been planted. So as you drift tonight, imagine a blinking cursor on a dark screen. Waiting, quiet. And understand that sometimes the future doesn't roar in. It types. Chapter 10. Global Dreams, 1985 to 2000. What happens when all the quiet changes finally connect? When a century's worth of whispers become a single global hum? It is the final chapter of the 20th century. But it doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like everything is beginning. In Berlin, crowds gather at a wall that has divided families, cities, and futures for nearly 3 decades. They do not scream. They touch the stone. They pass pieces hand to hand. In 1989, the Berlin Wall falls. Not with explosives, but with people. Moments later, in the echo of that event, borders shift. The Soviet Union fades. Nations emerge. Maps are redrawn. And across the world, democracy becomes less of a dream and more of a possibility. But politics isn't the only thing transforming. So is presence. In Switzerland, a quiet invention, the World Wide Web, begins to form. At first, it's just a system for scientists. But by 1995, it's on home computers. Dial-up tones fill bedrooms. Screens load slowly. And suddenly, you can talk to someone halfway across the planet without leaving your chair. The world is shrinking, not in space, but in silence. You don't have to shout to be heard anymore, you just have to log on. In South Africa, a man walks free after 27 years in prison. Nelson Mandela does not emerge bitter. He emerges with grace. And by 1994, he is president. In Japan, technology flourishes. Sony Walkmans, Tamagotchis. Tiny miracles of engineering. In every backpack and pocket. Music becomes global. MTV connects continents. Hip-hop is everywhere. So is grunge. So is pop. Culture no longer belongs to one country. It moves in waves across airwaves. In the final years of the millennium, the world watches the clock. Not with fear, but with curiosity. Y2K approaches. And with it, a question. What will happen when the numbers reset? But midnight comes, and the lights stay on. Planes stay in the air. Life continues. The 20th century ends not with panic, but with a pause, a breath, a flicker on a screen, and the soft sound of 1,000 modems dialing into the future. Closing reflections, a century of whispers. What if the greatest changes are never loud at all? What if the world was transformed not by noise, but by everything that came quietly and stayed? The 20th century is over. 100 years. 10 decades of motion, invention, heartbreak, and hope. We remember the loud moments, the wars, the speeches, the protests, the rockets. But it was the quiet ones that truly reshaped us. The girl writing in a diary, the child learning to type, the scientist scribbling an equation that no one would understand for another decade, the mother voting for the first time, the signal bouncing from one side of the planet to the other, silently stitching us together. A century ago, most people had never touched a phone. Now we carry the world in our pockets. A century ago, only the sky was above us. Now we've walked on the moon. A century ago, a thought took days to cross an ocean. Now it travels in milliseconds. And yet, the most important things have not changed. We still dream. We still wonder. We still whisper our ideas into the world, hoping someone will hear them. You've just traveled through time. Not across battlefields, but through bedrooms, libraries, labs, and late-night thoughts. Through the quiet spaces where change actually happens. So now,